we go. Oh,
Okay.
there we go.
Hey, so we have just hit record on this interview, and I'm very excited to be interviewing Gaby today. I think that they have a lot of insight due to the work that they do, and I'm excited to have them share that with us. And I think that anyone watching this interview will gain some helpful insight to the work that Gaby's doing with this interview. So, I want to introduce myself. My name is Olivia, and my pronouns are she, they. I'm the communications director at Therapy Access Project. Therapy Access Project was founded with the purpose of matching Black, Brown, Indigenous, and queer individuals with therapists that validate their identities and lived experiences. In addition to this work, we make mental health care and mental health care resources more accessible, specifically for populations that are disproportionately served in the mental health care system. So I am currently located in Bloomington, Illinois, which is a town built on the ancestral homeland of many indigenous tribes, including the Kickapoo, who were forced to move west to the Mississippi. This is also the ancestral homeland of the Peoria, Kaskaskia, Oglala Sioux, and Miami Nation. And I want to use this opportunity to recognize the erasure, genocide, displacement, and continued injustices perpetuated by non-Native settlers and the United States government upon all Native tribes. Okay, and then I think it's frozen, so I was going to pass it over to Gaby, but
Hmm.
issue. Is it frozen for you, Gaby?
Not on. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. It's just that your face is frozen.
Dang,
So I don't know
my
what the recording looks like, but as
okay.
long as the audio's there, I think we'll be okay. I'm in a different location too than normal, so I think maybe it's the Wi-Fi. So it's probably my fault, and I apologize for
Well,
that.
I have another laptop if you want me to try on there because um
I think we can go if you're not or am I frozen on your end?
no.
Okay. Then we can go ahead and keep going, and hopefully the recording will be okay. I think it'll be okay.
Okay. Um okay, sounds good. If at any point you are like this is not working, let me know because I've had issues on this. Oh, you know what? It says Zoom meeting not responding, so it might
Okay.
not be recording. Do you want me to troubleshoot and try again?
How about I'll just audio record it on my phone, and then because I'd also like to interview you in the future too. So if this doesn't work out, we can
Okay.
always do another one, and then I'll just use snippets of written words for it in our newsletter and things like that. So I'll just audio record it, and then
Okay.
at least we'll have that.
Mhm. Okay. Sorry about that.
No, I think I'm pretty sure it's me because I'm in a different location than I normally
Okay.
am.
No, you're
Okay.
good.
So yeah, if you just like to introduce yourself and your practice and
Sure. Yes, my name is Gabi. My pronouns are she, they. I am a queer, mixed race, disabled, licensed marriage and family therapist. My practice is both virtual, but I live in Southern California, LA area, on Tongva Gabrielino land. And yeah, do some in-person work, but most of it is virtual. For those in-person moments, it's located in Highland Park, which is a little neighborhood of Los Angeles. My practice is a space primarily for BIPOC and queer trans people to engage in therapy from a relational practice, which is the lens that I use. I also work from a body liberation, anti-carceral um, lens. So yeah, that's just the brief
yeah,
overview of my practice.
awesome. Yeah, and I'm sure we'll get a little more into it with the questions.
Yeah.
So the first question is, what made you want to become a therapist?
Yes, so I knew I wanted to be a therapist pretty young. I would say I was like 13 years old. And it started just because my own family's lived experience with mental health. It was always a topic around that age, um, was when I had some family members with some significant mental health struggles in that moment that had just kind of popped up. And as we know, these things are like brewing, but it was the first time that like my family actually started talking about it. And that's when I kind of started to take in my own lived experience and I started going to therapy around that age as well. Um, and from there, I kind of just grew up meeting a lot of really great therapists that I engaged with, and then some that I just really didn't connect with. And I think that like little rebellious teenager was like, I want to be the therapist that people do connect with.
Yeah,
And so, yeah, I jumped in and did that. Uh, yeah, and I've been here for a couple years now.
awesome. I think we kind of talked a little bit about this, about as far as destigmatizing therapy.
Mhm. Okay. The last thing I heard you say was we had talked about destigmatizing therapy. Uh,
Yeah. So I was gonna ask, how did your family feel about you going to therapy, or was it like that kind of a wake up call, and then they were like, okay, a little bit more accepting of therapy, or
yeah, good question.
Mhm,
Just from my own experience growing up in a mixed race Latino household, but for context, my dad is Italian Armenian, which Armenian culture we don't really talk about therapy either. But
mhm,
um, on my mom's side, straight 100% Mexicana, but my grandmother um, lived with us too, my mom's mom. So I speak Spanish. I was very much more immersed in that culture. So I would say that I got most of my like cultural differences and things like that from culture differences from white culture, from the Mexican lens. And I think on in terms of my immediate family, I was quite lucky in the sense that in some ways they were kind of forced to talk about mental health because a lot of my family members were struggling in terms of needing like requesting hospitalization, sometimes involuntary hospitalization. So at that point it was just in their face and it was
mhm.
like we can't not talk about this.
Yeah,
But even then I would say it took me quite some time to talk about it because we can get more into it about destigmatizing, but often within Latino culture, especially, we've seen um, Latina socialized female, this idea of not wanting to burden parents with your own mental health struggles or just struggles in general. So, this idea of kind of doing what you can by yourself and working through that for as long as you can was very real for me as well. So those are the snippets that I encountered more.
so the next question is, are there any identities that you focus on working with in particular?
Yes, primarily. So I've worked through a bunch of different areas, and the first area that really um, resonated with me, I worked in an eating disorder treatment center throughout all the levels of care. And in that setting, I got to see a lot of like the institutional harm that happens. Um, which was horrendous and has really shaped the way that I do my own work now as an anti-carceral provider. But it really allowed me to make space for um, eating disorders and body liberation. In that practice, I primarily focused with BIPOC and queer bodies as well. So that's really continued. So I work with a lot of body liberation, a lot of institutional harm, and working with people who have been in this system and have now come upon all of this trauma,
Mhm.
and so making space for those things. Um, the queer Latino experience is one that I work with a lot. Trying to think of any others with my little notes. Disability. Being a disabled person, disability and chronic illness are another area that I work under. So a lot of little pockets, and as we'll talk more, you'll see just like intersectionality as a whole is very important to me. So when folks share multiple of these identities, um, it's another area that we work with as well.
Okay, awesome.
Mhm.
So the next question, what do you find most rewarding about working with your current clients?
Yes, I love this work. I think the the thing that I find most rewarding as you had shared these questions with me and I was thinking about it was the privilege that I've had to be able to work with a lot of my clients for years on end, and seeing them throughout multiple stages of their life, seeing myself through multiple stages of my life, and them getting to have that experience of both of us. I have some clients that I look and like, wow, we are completely different people
Yeah.
than when we were 4 years ago. And so just getting to have that relational experience and see the build of trust and rapport and safety, is by far the most rewarding thing for me, to be able to talk with someone and for them to share, like, well, this aunt on this side, and they don't have to give an explanation. I know
Mhm.
exactly what
Yeah.
they mean when they say that, is really special to me. That people, that I have the honor to share space with people for that long feels like such a privilege.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I've been seeing my therapist for a long time, like about 5 years now, and I can
Mhm.
tell you that, like, having that space where you there's a comfortability level that, like, if I started with a new therapist, I would not have,
Yeah.
so, I mean, obviously starting a new journey with a new therapist is also amazing, but having those clients that have been with you for a really long time, it has to be really rewarding because you've seen
Yeah.
them through so many stages and you know you've changed through so many stages.
Yeah.
Okay, so in your opinion, how can mental health practitioners better support marginalized communities, particularly those who face intersecting forms of oppression?
It's a big question. A lot of these are heavy hitters,
Yeah.
but I think the first thing that comes to my mind is just listening to those that do have a different experience in you, these different forms of oppression that you have not experienced, I think is the biggest one. Most of the things that I have learned have been from engaging with content, reading like books from these people with lived experience. You'll hear me say lived experience so many times because I think it is like the utmost importance. And so that's the first thing I think, in terms of how we can better support. I think the other piece too is, even if you do share an identity, to never assume that just because you have a shared identity means that you have the same experience. Um, Making room for intersectionality. The idea of me as a queer, disabled Latina person will not have the same experience as just any Latina person or queer person or
Mhm.
disabled person. Like we need to make space for all of these
Yeah,
things. Um, so yeah, that's my short answer.
that's awesome, and I love hearing you say that, like, recognizing lived experience and knowing that you might not have the same lived experience. I think it really ties in with disability justice, you know, with
Yeah.
leadership of those most impacted, because that's
Hmm.
my favorite principle. Like all of the disability justice principles are my favorite at different times, but that one is one that I really like to focus on is leadership of those most impacted. So,
Yeah,
so
it's an
uh,
exciting one.
speaking of disability justice, that's the next question. So,
Mhm.
do you incorporate principles of disability justice into your practice? If so, what does this look like for you?
Yes, that was a fantastic segue. You're right.
Uh-huh.
Disability justice, in terms of my own experience, I've been disabled most of my life. Did I use those words? Um, Probably not. And I had to do a lot of work there. So once I actually found the principles upon reading, and like read them all, I was like, oh my God, I feel so seen. And so many of these things that so many of us disabled folks have been doing since the dawn of time, just didn't have the words for it necessarily. So yes, leadership of the most impacted is incredible. But I think the two that, as I've said many times, intersectionality, um, is by far my favorite one to incorporate. And the other one, I think, in terms of my practice and something that I have had to work in being more open with my clients, is sustainability. So those are the two for sure that, I think are the loudest right now in my practice. And just knowing the work of the ones that I can definitely incorporate more and, do my own inner work on as well.
Yeah, that's awesome. Um, do you work towards decolonizing your practice? If so, what does this look like for you?
Yes. Um, Decolonizing my practice looks a lot like having to take a step back and think, is this something that I feel aligned with? Or is this something that grad school taught me? Um, those are like the big ones whenever I'm thinking about decolonizing. Um, I'm thinking a lot about uh, professionalism and challenging professionalism, remembering that this is a concept that's rooted in white supremacy, and what that might look like for me. Um, yeah, those are like the first couple of things that I think. I also think about the fact that when I look back at my own ancestral lineage, the fact that we have been healing for the forever since the beginning of time, and that the idea that this is the only way to heal is a very new white concept.
Mhm.
So just constantly remembering those things, I think having graduated now, I don't know, like 3 years ago, I don't know. Like so many of those things are still so fresh in my brain that I haven't even fully processed, I think. And so those are the pieces. It's a very much a place that I still have a lot of growing to do in. But those are typically the ones of just like coming back, settling in, and thinking about, does this actually align with my being and what's going on here is how I would say I'd actively decolonize now.
Yeah. Especially the first piece of what you said, that's what a lot of the individuals I've interviewed have said, and that's one thing that maybe if in the future I'd love to do like a bigger Zoom with more the individuals I've interviewed, and maybe like talking about that in particular, like how do you take a step back after you've graduated and look at
Yeah.
what you learned there and work towards decolonizing your practice while taking what you maybe want from what you learned,
Hmm.
spent a lot of
Yeah.
money probably learning from there,
Yeah.
but also, making it your own and making it so that it's not, based in white supremacy and oppression. So, yeah.
Yeah. I wish that I went in knowing that I would have to do that.
Yeah.
And I think that I did not. I did not
Yeah.
know that. Like you're handed the DSM and thinking like, oh my God, I'm so powerful. And
Mhm.
then seeing all of the harm in that is
Right.
so, yeah, I remember even getting the DSM and being like, this doesn't feel good.
Right.
Something I'm given this thing and suddenly I'm supposed to just tell people. Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
I have a lot of qualms.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, we
definitely.
could spend a whole 40 minutes on the DSM, I think.
Yes. That is another way that I do decolonize is I do not diagnose unless folks ask for it because I can hold that some people find a diagnosis very validating and helpful and empowering. And so if that's the case, I do it. But otherwise, that is not something that I do. And I felt very free by not owning a DSM.
Yeah.
It's been incredible.
Yeah, it's definitely very complicated too because then you get into insurance and needing
Yes.
like the insurance code for that diagnosis to
Hmm.
heard, but yeah, so it's very complicated.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so how do you envision the future of therapy practices, particularly in terms of decolonization and re-indigenization efforts?
Yes. Similar to the previous question, I think the first thing that I think of when I envision and I'm just like dreaming about what this field could be, I think it is a future where those with lived experience are at the forefront, that they are the leaders of thought, similar disability justice. I think also moving away from this idea that evidence-based therapies are the only way to do therapy. Um, that the idea that this is the only way to heal is so limiting and just not accessible for everyone. I want to be in a space where, and I do have clients like this, where they can engage in having a full limpia, which is like an indigenous practice within Latino culture. And other indigenous groups, but like you can go to Olympia and then go to therapy. Like these things can exist together. And that is that's when I feel most excited about this work. Also community care and peer support, peer-led support being at the forefront as well and having the same value as me sitting in a room with someone, if not more value, I think. I just think like this shift in power dynamics is definitely what needs to change first. But those are the things that get me excited, that those could be in the majority seen as something with so much value too.
That's awesome, and I love that you and other individuals are working towards that, including
Mhm.
myself, but that, that really there's from what I can tell, more therapists that want to, take away those power dynamics and are in support of
Mhm.
community care and peer support and things like
Yeah,
that.
definitely. It's exciting. I mean, that's why that's something that really I love about Therapy Access Project is
Yeah,
just like a space to do this thing, which is very
yeah,
exciting to me.
yeah.
Mhm.
The next question, how do you work towards destigmatizing therapy primarily from within Latine culture?
Yes, so I think this question is important in a variety of ways, but I think that the biggest thing that I would say within all communities, but just speaking for my own, is meeting everyone where they're at. I have some Latina clients that are like ready to do everything and say like, this is my attachment style and this is why I feel this way and intergenerational trauma and like throwing all of these words. And then there are some people who are coming in saying, I don't know anything about this, but I need to try something. And I'm certainly not like from the get go with that person being, okay, let's talk about attachment style. Like that doesn't interest me in that way. And also just not what they need. And so I think meeting people where they're at, if people want it to look like just talking to another brown person about what it's like to be brown in our families, I'm here for it. So I think making it the most approachable it can be when it can also feel really scary. Um, I think also language has been a big thing. I was raised speaking both languages, but in terms of my comfortability, having a session in full Spanish is something that I'm working towards, but not quite there yet. And so that being said, I can understand Spanish completely. So I have some folks that feel so much more comfortable speaking in Spanish and will share completely in Spanish, and then I can respond in English or Spanglish. That's like my all-time favorite session when we're just going back and forth and doing our thing. That's when I feel like that in itself is destigmatizing therapy, that you can show up however you want to show up. Makes it so much easier to get in the door, I think.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's lovely.
Thank you.
How do you navigate power dynamics in the therapeutic relationships, especially concerning issues of privilege, oppression, and colonial legacies?
Yeah, this one's a tough one. I would say the first thing, and something that I'll give grad school this one, um, like being upfront and talking about these layers of oppression is actually completely important and necessary. Um, so that's like the piece that I'm holding right here in this part of my brain. And then the other part of my brain also, I very actively think about how I can show up in the space and be upfront about how I want to show up in the space. So the biggest thing here for me is I do not see myself as an expert with my clients. I never will be the expert. They will, in fact, be the expert, and I'm getting the chance to provide insight and sit with them. That's really what I see my job as, is sitting with people and their stuff, and to co-collaborate on this. When someone asks me like, hey, can you take the wheel for a little bit, I need some help, we can talk about what that might look like, but that will never be my go-to, um, which I think is necessary when we're talking about power dynamics. And still naming the layers of privilege and naming what things I don't have lived experience with, of being a light-skinned person. Like that is nothing. I will never have that experience. And that is necessary. I also am such a believer in having a therapist with shared identities. And sometimes addressing and navigating power dynamics is saying, I love working with you. And also, if you need someone with a different experience, I 1000% am here to help you find that and will not give up until we find something. Um, is another way that we work through it. So yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
everything you said was important, obviously, but, one thing that has come up again in multiple of these interviews is the willingness to say, "I might not be the right fit for you, but I will
Mhm.
help you find someone that is," So I
Yeah.
think really that's really important for individuals to recognize that, like, your therapist should never be mad at you if you're saying like this isn't
No,
working for me, and they
really
should
not.
be willing to support you on your healing journey, whatever that looks like for you. So
Yes, if your therapist is mad at you, that is their own work to
yeah.
do. Um, and I think the piece here too is like, I will help you find someone. It might be hard, like, and it
Mhm.
shouldn't be hard, but it might be hard.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to leave until we figure it out. And then there are some folks that we will start that journey and realize, you know, maybe we can't find someone right now. And
Mhm.
I feel okay as the client saying, I feel okay moving forward because you actually have taken the step to try and help me. Uh,
Mhm.
Feels, I think, really liberating for people too. I know it felt liberating for me in my own therapy practice as well.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Awesome. Um, what strategies do you utilize to create culturally sensitive and inclusive healing spaces?
Trying to think of something that I haven't already said to give you some. As I'm looking at my notes, I'm like, these look really similar. Um, Consistently learning from others with lived experience. I think Um, Instagram has been an incredible resource for me as a clinician, for me as a therapy goer, in terms of finding inclusive spaces, especially being disabled. The online community has been so empowering for me because often I cannot get out of bed. So, like, having that resource feels really important. I also think the strategies that I use in the room are always thinking about accommodations, and the ways that we can collaborate on what your needs are and what we can do to show up in this space together. And it might not look like something, it certainly didn't look like something I learned in grad school. I've thrown that out the window. As we've seen, I'm dragging grad school right now. And also thankful that I had it because I
Yeah.
wouldn't be here. Anyways, thinking about those things, I think about some of my clients who are AAC users and thinking, okay, how can we make this work in this space? We're in family therapy. Okay. Is it me having my phone by me at all times so that you might text me and we can go that way and I can share for you? Is it you're feeling too overstimulated right now by all of the things around you? Let's text instead. Is it not talking at all? Is it doing, I'm a crafty person too. Is it crocheting in session?
Mhm.
And so those are the pieces that, in terms of inclusivity, is showing up however people want to show up and remembering that it might look different for everybody. Um, and I think that often it is like it's kind of an exciting experience for me too, to think about all of the ways that we can heal and that we can figure it out together and think of something that we didn't even think was possible in a therapy space. And here we are doing it. Those are I would say the collaboration piece is one of the biggest strategies that I have, aside from, the engaging with leaders of thought and reading and all of those things. So trainings too. I get really
Yeah.
excited about trainings, um, from other folks of areas, and Project Let's trainings are my
Mhm.
favorite. Like, those areas feel really important for me in terms of keeping my um, cultural sensitivity and inclusive spaces, and that part of me growing and learning is really important.
That's awesome.
Mhm.
Okay, so the last question, do you have any tips for those going to therapy about how they can get more out of their sessions?
Yes. This one was also a tough one for me because, in terms of, because I've worked in like various places where I was very much like, this is the modality you have to do and you have to be done this many times. My like, really like, I'm losing the word brain fog, but um, not hesitation isn't the right word, but just like, I'm feeling resistance. That's the word. I'm feeling really resistant to, like, these are the things that you have to do, which I know is not the question, but I hear my brain being like, I don't wanna. But when those people do ask me, like, hey, um, I want to do something in between sessions, and I want to feel like I'm getting the most out. If I have journalers, I know that's like a pretty common one. I always make space for journaling. Something that I've done, especially with um, my other neurodivergent folks, myself included, texting feels really helpful, based on your therapist's policy, of course, or
Mhm.
emailing. But I have a lot of folks who, in the moment, need to share something and feel like all of the emotions are so heavy in that moment, my favorite thing to do with clients is they will share at the beginning of a text or an email and say, for session later, do not
Mhm.
respond right now. And they'll put it all out there. And then I get to come in at the beginning of session and say, okay, I read this before. Let's pull it up again. Do you still want to talk? Sometimes they're saying like, yes, thank you, I forgot. Or they'll say, I'm over it.
Yeah.
But just to have that resource has been, I think, the most helpful. I've done it with my own therapist as well, via text or email, whatever, of course, they feel comfortable with. Um, Also accommodations, I think, is the biggest one. Is think about, is there something that would make this space feel more inclusive for me? Is it having closed captionings in my meeting and figuring out how we can do that? Is it turning off my camera? Is it going on a walk? Like thinking of these areas, I think really help us show up in a way that sometimes I think as therapists we forget that there are other options that we can do, that we can get creative. um, so yeah, I think those are the ways that we can really um, get the most out of our sessions. And then of course, for those people who are looking for a therapist, really think about if having a therapist with lived experience of your own or a shared identity feels important to you, and seeking out places like Therapy Access Project or inclusive therapists or other areas that can help nurture and guide you in this way, because I think that has been the most pivotal thing for me as someone who goes to therapy, is finding a therapist with a shared identity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for joining me for this interview. I know I learned a lot and I really enjoyed speaking with you. So I'm excited for our audience to see this.
Yeah.
Um, then I'm going to plug your website and your Instagram. So
Yes.
it's Races Therapy, right? Am
Yeah,
I saying
Raíces Therapy,
Races?
.co. It's not a com, it's a co. Yes, and my Instagram is Chicana Therapist. So yeah.
Yeah, and then for any of these, so, I usually explain sometimes for the newsletter, I think I'm just gonna split up, like, have, like, a question at the top and then kinda compare the different, like, interviews from different therapists maybe in there, so I don't know that this will ever be posted as, like, a
Yeah.
full-length video, we'll see, though, but anywhere that it is posted, all of your, socials and your website will be linked,
Great.
s yeah,
Thank you so much, Olivia. Yes, as I was going to share, I should have shared this before we recorded when you asked if I had any questions. Feel free to snip this, do whatever you want. I only want this to feel helpful. So use as little as you want or as much. I'm cool. I'm here for it. So thank you for
awesome.
the space.
Yes, and I'm sure I'll be in contact if you are interested in doing other
Of
interviews or
course. Yes,
other
I'd love to.
person apps.
Yeah. And would you
Yeah.
like this recording as well?
Yes, yeah,
Okay.
if you could send it to me, that would be great.
Okay. Sounds good. Thank you so much, Olivia.
Yeah, thank you,
Okay.
Gab. Nice meeting you.
You too. Bye.